Welcome back, everyone. In today's episode, we're going to go over the MMA Guru's picks for UFC 291. In last week's Holly Holm Bueno Silva main event, we disagreed on two fights. The Terrence McKinney fight, I thought he was going to lose, and I won that one. And then he went with Prado over Izatar, so we split it 1-1 last week in the fights we disagreed with. Okay, let's get into the video. Let's see what the MMA Guru has to say for the main card of UFC 291. In the first fight, we have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Michel Pereira. And for me, it's going to be Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I think between them fighting at elevation at 4,000 feet above sea level and Wonderboy's experience, I think he's going to take this. Let's see what the MMA Guru has to say.
Gone. Up the card, Stephen Thompson versus Michel Pereira. I'm going to go with Stephen Thompson. I was worried about Stephen Thompson here because I was thinking, you know what, Michel Pereira, I've seen him switch it up and dunk Zelim Imadaev and then go for a rear naked choke and nearly get it. So he does have a really impressive ability of doing that. And he did the same thing to Chaos Williams. But those guys aren't nearly as good on the feet as Stephen Thompson is. And I want to say this as well. Santiago Ponzinibbio ain't really that guy anymore. And he took Ponzinibbio to a very, very, very close decision. Pulled out of two fights in the meantime. Sean Brady and a fight with Stephen Thompson that got moved actually to this later date. Either way, he's been out for a long time. I like Michel Pereira, but his weight cut's never been good for him. His reach isn't the best for his size. I think he's going to have trouble on the feet here against Wonderboy. And I think his striking mainly worked against people that are flat-footed. You know what I mean? People that are flat-footed, standing in front of him. That's where Michel Pereira is going to be able to get off his flying knees. That's where he's going to get off his Superman punches. I think against an elusive Wonderboy, it's going to be a lot more difficult to find those shots. And I was watching back some Stephen Wonderboy fights. He's not lost on the ground. Like, Gilbert Burns takes down Neil Magny, immediately submits him. Gilbert Burns gets down Wonderboy, can't really do anything to him. You know what I mean? Wonderboy is adept enough to not get destroyed on the ground by his opponent. I know Belal Muhammad did dominate him, but he's not getting finished in those moments. Do I trust Michel Pereira to be able to hold down Wonderboy over 3 straight rounds where, you know, I don't think he's going to get a finish on Wonderboy if he takes it to the ground. Belal Muhammad couldn't, who I think is a better grappler than Michel Pereira, and Gilbert Burns couldn't, who I think is a way better grappler than Michel Pereira. So
I have to agree with the MMA Guru here. One thing I think he's missing is that this is at elevation, and if Pereira's going to go through all these Superman punches and front flip kicks and all these crazy high energy movements, he's not going to be able to last 3 rounds. And I don't see him getting close enough to Wonderboy Thompson to be able to even get a takedown. Like he said, Wonderboy is so good at keeping people at a distance. I don't think Pereira is going to... He's never seen a guy like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. A lot of people, when they get in there with him, like what happened to Jeff Neal, they're like, I can't find him. You know, whenever he's throwing his strikes, like Wonderboy is just gone. And, you know, he does work with Chris Weidman, so hopefully his wrestling is getting better and better with each training camp. Even though Gilbert Burns and Belal Muhammad were both able to get him down and keep him there, like he said, they weren't able to inflict any damage.
it's going to be a stand-up fight. If Michel Pereira wants to take it to the ground, he better be willing to do that for the distance of the fight. And at Salt Lake City, for Michel Pereira, a guy who was gassing out against Nico Price, couldn't finish him early on. We just saw Lawler dust him up, put him away in about 30 seconds. So I'm going to have to go with Wonderboy here. A guy in Michel Pereira who's known for gassing out is now going to be at Salt Lake City.
As soon as I get done saying that, the MMA Guru brings up the elevation in Salt Lake City, 4,000 feet above sea level. And if Pereira is gassing out against Nico Price, I just don't see any way possible that he is going to beat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson with all that experience and the wealth of knowledge in his corner. No chance. Wonderboy Thompson gets it done. The next fight is Michael Chiesa and Kevin Holland. My first inclination was I thought Kevin Holland was going to win. But then Michael Chiesa's ground game is really good, and he might be able to take Kevin Holland down and get the submission. But then I saw that Michael Chiesa just arrived in Salt Lake City yesterday. That's not enough time to get acclimated to 4,000 feet, so I'm worried about Michael Chiesa gassing out. From a betting perspective, I'm not touching this fight at all whatsoever. And I guess I'm going to go with Kevin Holland, but this fight is the most 50-50 fight on the card, and I'm not strong with my prediction either way. Let's see what the MMA Guru has to say.
Michael Chiesa versus Kevin Holland. Now, this is a worrying one. I'm going to go with Kevin Holland to win this fight. But I am worried about Kevin Holland winning this fight. Michael Chiesa could just half guard camp on top of Kevin Holland. That is very, very possible. Very possible. And that's the worry here that I have. If he does get down Holland, he might just lay in half guard on top and win based on that each and every round. I think there is too much time in this fight on the feet for Kevin Holland not to catch Michael Chiesa, who, as I said earlier with Trevin Giles being naturally talented at boxing, Michael Chiesa is not built for war. I know that sounds weird. It absolutely does. He's yoked, he's an athlete, he's in good shape. He will never understand striking. There's certain fighters like that. He will never understand striking. And with Kevin Holland, who's dangerous from all areas, I think he's going to be able to catch him on the feet. You know what I mean? Taking Neil Magny to a competitive decision. RDA win is really good, but what version of Chiesa are we getting here, man? What version of Chiesa are we getting? And it's nearly been 2 years since his fight with Sean Brady. He's on the ESPN desk. He's got his little roundup show with Paul Felder. He's 35 years of age. Kevin Holland's got momentum. He's coming off a big win against Santiago Ponzinibbio. Michael Chiesa just pulled out of a fight, or had a fight cancelled recently, so he's had to do a whole other training camp for this one without a payoff for him. I think that's
I agree with the MMA Guru about Michael Chiesa. One of my main things I thought about this fight was Michael Chiesa's inactivity. He's fought 5 times in the last 5 years, and Kevin Holland, I think 2 years ago, and like during the pandemic, he fought like 6 times in 1 year. So he's got that forward momentum going. He's the more active fighter. He's actively in the gym getting better and better and better. I just really think it's going to be hard for Michael Chiesa to beat Kevin Holland. The next fight on the card is Tony Ferguson versus Bobby Green. I think this very well could be the last time we see Tony Ferguson in the octagon. If he loses again, I just can't see Dana White giving him another fight, even though the fans always tune in when Tony Ferguson fights. Let's see what the MMA Guru thinks.
Up the card, Tony Ferguson versus Bobby Green. Stylistic nightmare for Tony Ferguson. He is good, and Bobby Green, let's be real, has had some lackluster performances recently against Jared Gordon. He had a pretty lackluster performance as well against Drew Dober, where he ended up losing, but he looked great early on, and this is the point that I want to make. The reason why he didn't look that good against Jared Gordon, not aside from the headbutt, before that, in the fight, he wasn't looking good, is because Jared Gordon was making him go first. You know what I mean? We see that with Islam Makhachev made Bobby Green go first. Obviously, the grappling is there as well. But you look throughout his career, he doesn't do good against guys that make him go first. Moises, even though I thought Bobby Green won that fight, was backing up, making him go first, trying to catch him with counter shots. Bobby Green doesn't like leading the dance. His hands-down style is not built for leading the dance. His hands-down Philly shell style is built for defensiveness. You know what I mean? It's built for counterattacks. So he likes fighters coming straight towards him. And you saw against Jared Gordon, Gordon was backing up and just throwing these nice hooks on the counterattack of Bobby Green and catching him with his hands down coming in. Tony Ferguson's going to put the pressure on Bobby Green. And that's what Nasrat Haqparast tried to do. That's what Dober was trying to do early on, and he was getting tuned up by Bobby Green. That's what Alia Quinta tried to do. That's what Fiziev tried to do. You know what I mean? That's what Lando Venata tried to do to an extent, and then eventually started getting on his bike. But these fighters that get aggressive on Bobby Green and start going for him, it plays into his game, and Tony Ferguson doesn't know another way of fighting than to get aggressive and get in someone's face. I think neither of them are going to have a problem with the cardio in a 3-rounder here. I want Tony Ferguson to win. It'd be so sad to see him lose again. But at the end of the day, I think this is a tailor-made matchup for Bobby Green. I can see Ferguson getting clipped and put away on the back foot by Bobby.
I do have to agree with the MMA Guru on this. I think this is a fight that is meant for Bobby Green to win. But I do think that Tony Ferguson does have a path to victory, but it's not getting in a striking match with Bobby Green. He's a great wrestler. Use your goddamn wrestling, Tony Ferguson. Don't strike with him. He needs to not even strike with him for 1 second. Opening bell, go in, act like you're going to throw a punch, shoot that double leg, take Bobby Green to the ground, and those submissions will be there for him. Will he do that? I absolutely doubt it. Tony Ferguson is just Terminator style. I'm going to march forward until you put me out. And that's just the way he fights. Unfortunately for him, that's going to result in a loss in this fight. What he needs to do is go for the legs, get Bobby Green down to the ground, because his submission defense is not that great. You saw what Islam did to him. He got his back and choked him out, boom, right away. So, if Tony wants to win, he's got to wrestle. I doubt that he's going to wrestle. I'm going with Bobby Green to get it done.
Card, Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira. This is a low fight amount card right here. I thought I was going to be doing another 40 minutes. Either way, Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira. I'm going to go with Alex Pereira here over Jan Blachowicz. Jan Blachowicz has the ability to take down Alex Pereira, but does he? You know what I mean? Because it took until the later rounds against Israel Adesanya for Blachowicz to be able to get a takedown on him. And maybe that was by design. Maybe that's what they were game planning for. But he did try a few times in those early rounds and had his takedowns shut down by a much weaker and smaller Israel Adesanya. Although he wasn't as weak and as small as people were suggesting he was in that matchup with Blachowicz, he's not Pereira against Blachowicz, who's way stronger with the underhooks, way stronger in the clinch. And we saw that in the Israel Adesanya fight, outside of in round 3, where they ended up in a bit of a spin, and Adesanya reversed a trip attempt from Pereira and ended up on top, and it seemed really bad for Pereira. Early in that fight, he was way stronger than Adesanya in the clinch, and I don't see Blachowicz having a massive, explosive takedown that's going to be so fast that Pereira doesn't see it coming.
I'm going to have to disagree with the MMA guru a little bit here. I think when Blachowicz felt Israel Adesanya's power, he thought he could strike with him. But he has to know going into this fight that Alex Pereira has one-hitter-quitter power and can put him out with one punch. So, Blachowicz is going to shoot for double legs early, and we saw that Israel Adesanya was able to get double legs very easily against Alex Pereira. And I think if Blachowicz is smart, he's not going to get into this ego-driven strikers battle with Alex Pereira. And if he does, he's going to get finished. But I do think Blachowicz is going to fight smart, he's going to get the takedown, and he's going to grind out a decision victory. Finally, we arrive at the main event of the evening for UFC 291, Justin Gaethje versus Dustin Poirier 2 for the BMF belt. I'm leaning towards Dustin Poirier here. I got a bet on Poirier at minus 150 odds. I just think when there's no threat of the takedown, Dustin Poirier is almost impossible to beat at 155. Justin Gaethje just hasn't evolved enough to get over the hump to beat Dustin Poirier. Let's see what the MMA guru has to say.
Up the card, Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje. I'm going with Justin Gaethje over Dustin Poirier. Reason being, I think Justin Gaethje nearly was beating Dustin Poirier in their first fight that they had, was on his way to beating Dustin Poirier in the first fight that they had. But then he got caught. Of course, Poirier was doing really good. He wasn't on his way. Let me take that all back. He was hanging with Dustin Poirier in that first fight and giving as good as he got. Poirier might have been up on volume, but Gaethje was chewing up his leg, landing his own good shots. Whatever. Poirier ends up winning. Very cool. When I look at the Gaethje who fought Dustin Poirier in that first fight, he had like a self-deletion mindset in that fight. The Gaethje I see against Poirier in their first fight that was competitive was nothing like the Gaethje we are seeing now. Nothing like him. In skill, technique, IQ, fight IQ, general ability. Justin Gaethje is a night and day different fighter than the one that originally fought Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier is the same looking guy. Maybe his boxing's got a bit crisper. Maybe his head movement's got a little bit better. To me, he's the same Dustin Poirier, but a little bit more well-refined. You know? And let's not forget this as well. In the Gaethje versus Chandler fight, which was before the Poirier-Chandler fight, which is important when it comes to how much damage Chandler has been taken. In the Gaethje versus Chandler fight, Gaethje was in control of the fight. You know what I mean? Chandler caught him in round 1 and had a big flurry. Other than that, in round 2, he didn't really have much success against Gaethje, and he had a bit of success at the start of round 3 against Gaethje. Gaethje, for the majority of that fight, was in full control. Dustin Poirier against Michael Chandler was in control of that fight for the last 30 seconds of round 1 and the last 30 seconds of the fight.
This is the fight that MMA Guru and myself disagree on the most. I don't think he was winning that Dustin Poirier fight at all whatsoever. He was landing leg kicks, and then for those leg kicks, he was getting punched in the face the majority of the fight. And MMA math doesn't add up. Just because Justin Gaethje had a little bit better of a performance against Michael Chandler than Dustin Poirier did doesn't mean that Justin Gaethje is now going to beat Dustin Poirier. With Michael Chandler, there's the threat of the wrestling. With Justin Gaethje, there is zero threat of wrestling at all. And Dustin Poirier knows this. If Dustin Poirier can check leg kicks or avoid them altogether, he is going to beat the living brakes off of Justin Gaethje, mark my words. And for the MMA Guru to say that Dustin Poirier hasn't evolved in the 5 years since him and Justin Gaethje last fought is absolutely ridiculous. Justin Gaethje may be a little more reserved like he was in the Fiziev fight, but he's still the same guy. He throws crazy wild punches. He loves to land the leg kicks. He throws uppercuts. He still doesn't wrestle. He has no jiu-jitsu. He has no submission defense. There's no threat of any wrestling at all whatsoever. So Dustin Poirier knows exactly what's coming at him in this fight. And that's why I'm picking Dustin Poirier to win the main event and the BMF title at UFC 291. I hope you guys enjoyed our little back and forth. There are 2 fights we disagree on. I'm going with Jan. He's going with Pereira. And then he's going with Gaethje. I'm going with Poirier. We'll see who comes out victorious at the end of UFC 291 this Saturday night.